following story is the strange mystery of a man who lost his life in room 1046. The registration. On January the 2nd, 1935, at about 1:20 p.m, a man approached the front desk at the President Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, and asked for an interior room several floors up and a room that faced the inner courtyard rather than the street. He signed the register as Roland T. Owen and gave Los Angeles as his home address and paid for 1 day. He looked about 30 years of age, had dark brown hair and a large horizontal scar on the side of his scalp. The desk clerk gave Mr. Owen the key to room 1046 and sent bellboy Randolph Propst to show Owen the way to his room. As the two got off the elevator on the 10th floor, they headed to room 1046 where Owen unlocked the door and entered, while Propst turned on the light. Propst watched as Owen took a black hairbrush from his overcoat pocket, along with a black comb and toothpaste, and that was all he had. Owen then placed the 3 items above the sink, and the 2 men then exited the room and headed back down the hallway towards the elevator. Propst then asked Owen if it was okay if he went back to the room and locked it. Owen gave him the key and Propst went back to the room, turned off the lights and locked the door. He then returned to Owen, gave him the key, and the 2 of them took the elevator back to the 1st floor. The maid. On the first day, a maid called Mary Soptic went to room 1046 to clean and found the door locked. She knocked and Owen let her in, and she then apologised, saying she could call back later, but Owen said it was all right and to go right ahead. She said he appeared to be frightened. As Soptic was cleaning, Owen put on his overcoat, went into the bathroom to brush his hair and then left the room, reminding her to leave the door unlocked because he was expecting a friend in a few minutes. Soptic noticed that the shades were tightly drawn and the desk lamp provided only a dim light. The following morning, Thursday, January the 3rd, Soptic headed to room 1046 around 10:30 a.m. to clean it. Assuming that Owen was out, she unlocked the door with her passkey and entered. Owen was sitting in the dark. The telephone rang and Owen answered, and after a moment said, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I just had breakfast." After a moment he repeated, "No, I'm not hungry." Soptic finished cleaning, gathered up the soiled towels and left. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, after the clean towels had arrived from the laundry, she took a fresh set to Owen's room. She heard 2 men talking and knocked gently on the door and said that she wanted to leave the clean towels. "We don't need any," replied the rough voice loudly, which was peculiar since Soptic knew there were no towels in the room, having removed them herself that morning. Later that day, the maid went back to the room with the fresh towels where the door was unlocked. The room was dark, and she could see from the light from the hallway that Owen was still lying across the bed, completely dressed. She then noticed a note on the desk which said, "Don, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Wait." Later, in a signed statement to the police, she said that from his actions and the expression on his face, Owen seemed to be either worried about something or afraid, and that he always wanted to kind of keep in the dark. The argument. That afternoon, on January the 3rd, a woman by the name of Jean Owen, no relation, from Lee Summit, Missouri, drove into Kansas City to do some shopping and then meet with her boyfriend, Joe Reinhardt, who worked at the Midland Flower Shop. After shopping, she felt ill and went to the shop to tell Mr. Reinhardt that she didn't feel up to going out that night and that she would get a room at the Hotel President so she could avoid driving back to Lee Summit that day. She told Reinhardt that she would let him know what room she was staying in. She arrived at the Hotel President about 6 o'clock and called Reinhardt about 6:50 p.m. and told him that she was staying in room 1048. He came to the hotel about 9:30 p.m. and left around 10:30 p.m. In a statement to the police, she said that during the night she heard a lot of arguing, which sounded like it was coming from the same floor. The voices consisted of men and women talking loudly and cursing. When the noise continued, she was about to call the desk clerk, but decided against it. The bellboy. The following day, on Friday, January the 4th, the hotel operator noticed the phone in room 1046 was off the hook. She sent bellboy Harold Pike upstairs to replace the receiver. The bellboy was able to gain access to the room using a passkey to open the door and found Owen lying on the bed naked. The bellboy assumed he was drunk and could see the phone had been knocked over, so he just replaced the receiver and left. A few hours later, the phone in room 1046 was again off the hook, and again the bellboy was sent upstairs to replace it. On this occasion, he knocked loudly before entering, but got no response, so again used his passkey. He found the room dark, and when he turned on the light, was shocked to discover that Owen was in front of the door on his hands and knees. Owen looked barely alive. The bellboy looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom, and immediately fled in fear to get help. When a doctor and the police arrived, he had a fractured skull and numerous knife wounds, one of which had a punctured lung. The doctor concluded that the injuries were 6 to 7 hours old, which means that when the bellboy first visited the room hours before, the man he thought was drunk on the bed was actually severely injured. Unfortunately, the police found few clues, and all of Owen's clothing, including the black coat, were gone. Also missing were the hotel-supplied soap, shampoo and towels. Police found a hairpin, an unlit cigarette, and, on the telephone stand, found 4 small fingerprints, which they surmised could be from a woman. Even though Owen was severely injured and semi-conscious, he was still able to speak a few words. However, what he said was no help to the police. He claimed that nobody had been in the room with him, and his explanation for his injuries was that he fell against the bathtub, obviously forgetting that he'd been tied up. By the time he reached the hospital, he was in a coma, and his condition deteriorated, and he died just after midnight. A sketch of the victim was published in the newspaper under the heading, "Do you recognise this man?" His body was put on display at a local funeral home. Photos were sent out, but no match was ever made. As the victim was about to be buried as a John Doe, an anonymous donor sent money for a proper funeral, and he was laid to rest under the false name Roland T. Owen. A bouquet of roses, also paid for anonymously, was placed on the grave. The card read, "Love forever, Louise." Jean Owen was held for questioning, but was released when police were able to verify her account with Joe Reinert. In the fall of 1936, a woman thought she recognised Owen's picture when she came across an article in the magazine. The picture looked very much like the son of a friend of hers, whom the family had not seen since he left Birmingham, Alabama in April of 1934. The murder victim was finally identified as Artemis Ogletree, who had been missing since he vanished from Birmingham, Alabama in April of 1934. Ogletree was younger than anyone suspected, just 17. Police now knew who their victim was. However, the police did establish that Owen had been seen in certain liquor places on 12th Street in the company of 2 women, but they still did not know who killed him or why. So, who murdered Artemis Ogletree? Who is the man with the rough voice who told the maid to go away? Was that Don? Whose fingerprints were found in room 1046? Did they belong to a woman, and was it Louise? Did Louise pay for the funeral? Was Louise the killer? If not Louise, who else killed him? Why was he killed? What exactly happened in room 1046 that night?